In 1984, Brian Crighton was just a mechanic fixing police bikes. Norton's racing days were long gone and the company was barely alive. But inside the workshop, Crighton saw something nobody else did, a way to turn a slow, heavy police bike into a race winner. People at Norton told him it was impossible. They said the rotary engine would never survive racing. So he worked alone, after hours, in a small shed behind the factory. 2 years later, that same shed-built machine would go faster than anything Norton had built in decades. And 8 years later, on the Isle of Man, it would win the toughest race in the world, proving the one man working alone was right and the entire factory was wrong. This is the shocking truth behind Brian Crichton's Norton Rotary Racer. In 1984, Norton was barely surviving. The company that once dominated motorcycle racing was now building bikes for one customer, British Police Departments. The Norton Commander was a 588cc rotary touring bike designed for patrol work, weighing nearly 500 pounds with equipment and making 79 horsepower. Police liked it because it was reliable and different from Japanese bikes. That single fact kept Norton alive. Brian Crichton joined Norton that year as a service technician. His job was fixing police motorcycles when they came in for maintenance. He was 37 years old and knew motorcycles inside out, but he didn't have any formal engineering degree. What he had was experience from the 1970s when he won the British 50cc championship 3 times racing modified Honda road bikes because he couldn't afford proper race machines. Everything Crichton knew about making bikes faster, he learned by doing it himself. When Crichton looked at the Norton rotary engine in crash police bikes, he saw potential nobody else saw. The Vankel rotary design was simple compared to traditional engines. Instead of pistons going up and down, you had a triangular rotor spinning inside an oval housing. No pistons, no connecting rods, no camshafts, no valves. Just 3 major moving parts. The rotor completed 1 rotation and produced 3 power pulses, while a traditional 4-stroke engine needed 2 complete rotations for 1 power pulse. The rotary made power constantly with smooth, endless torque that conventional engines couldn't match. Norton management didn't care about racing because the company was focused on staying in business. Crichton kept suggesting they build a race bike with the rotary engine, and management kept telling him he was wasting his time. But Crichton wouldn't stop asking. In 1986, Norton management gave up arguing with this persistent mechanic. They told the factory caretaker to move out of his shed behind the workshop and gave Crichton permission to use it after hours. Management still thought he was wrong, but at least giving him space might get him to stop bothering them. Crichton grabbed an engine from a crashed Commander collecting dust in the workshop and started working nights and weekends in that shed using his own money. The shed had basic hand tools and a workbench, nothing fancy. What happened next would embarrass some of the biggest manufacturers in motorcycling. Modifying a rotary engine is different from building a traditional race motor. You can't bolt in bigger pistons or install wilder camshafts because those parts don't exist in a rotary. The rotary works through ports cutting into the housing walls, letting air in and exhaust out. The shape and timing of those ports control everything about engine performance. Crichton started with cooling. Police commanders overheated in slow city traffic because they had large cooling fins designed for bikes crawling through streets. At racing speeds where bikes move much faster, too much cooling would have made the engine run too cold at 150 miles per hour and hurt performance. Crichton reduced the cooling fin so the engine would run hotter but stay in the correct temperature range at racing speeds. Then he invented something brilliant called the exhaust ejector system. The rotary ran extremely hot, with exhaust gases leaving at higher temperatures than regular engines. Crichton figured out how to use that heat to create a vacuum effect. Hot exhaust rushing through the pipes at high velocity created negative pressures behind it, like a vacuum cleaner sucking air. That vacuum pulled cooling air through the engine from the front while helping draw fresh air into the carburetors. The system used the engine's own waste heat to improve both cooling and breathing. Since the rotary produced 3 power strokes per revolution, you had 3 exhaust pulses constantly. Crichton tuned the exhaust pipe length and diameter to maximize the vacuum effect at racing RPM. The system worked like a 2-stroke expansion chamber but adapted for the rotary's unique characteristics. The result shocked everyone. The stock Commander made 79 horsepower. After Crichton's modifications with just port work and exhaust tuning, the engine produced around 120 horsepower. That's 40 additional horsepower without a turbocharger, without nitrous oxide, just better airflow and smarter exhaust design. Even more impressive, the power came on smooth across the entire rev range instead of being peaky. Strong usable torque from 6,000 RPM all the way to redline meant riders could shift early and still have power everywhere. For the chassis, Crichton went to Spondon Engineering for a custom aluminum frame that was light and rigid. The first prototype used suspension parts from a Suzuki and lightweight wheels. Total weight was 320 pounds with a power-to-weight ratio better than anything in British racing. In 1987, Crichton needed to convince Norton management this shed-built bike was actually fast. He took it to Mirror Testing Ground, a high-speed facility with professional radar guns where police tested patrol cars and companies like Jaguar tested sports cars. A police officer with a radar gun stood trackside, and the facility manager warned Crichton's test rider to watch for fast Jaguars on the circuit. The test rider took the Norton out for a full throttle run. The policeman's radar gun read 170 miles per hour. He was shocked because he'd never seen his radar gun register that high. The Mirror manager immediately ordered all Jaguars off the circuit, calling them the slow Jaguars because a 588cc motorcycle built in a caretaker's shed had just proven faster than their expensive British sports cars. Norton management finally paid full attention. They told Crichton to keep developing the bike and made the shed the official Norton race shop. In August 1987, Crichton took the bike to its first race at Darley Moor, a small club event. Norton employee Malcolm Heath rode it. The Norton finished third in its first ever race. Through 1988, Crichton kept refining everything. The chassis handled poorly at first because the Rotary had almost no engine braking. When riders closed the throttle before corners, the engine just coasted instead of slowing the rear wheel. This made the bike push wide in corners. Riders Simon Buckmaster and Trevor Nation did countless test sessions trying different settings. The bike got better but still wasn't winning consistently. Then in October 1988 at Brands Hatch, Steve Spray showed up to substitute ride. Spray had never sat on the Norton before. Crichton asked if he wanted any setup changes, and Spray said just put fuel in it. Spray went out and won both races. The crowd went wild. The Norton sounded like nothing else with a deep, angry roar that climbed to a high-pitched wail at full throttle. When riders closed the throttle for corners, flames shot from the exhaust in blue and orange bursts visible from the grandstands. Watching from the crowd was a marketing executive from John Player Special Cigarettes. JPS had sponsored Norton before in 1973. This executive watched the crowd reaction and saw the race wins. Within weeks, JPS signed a 3-year sponsorship deal. The Norton would race in 1989 in the iconic black, gold, and silver JPS livery. The 1989 season was total domination. Steve Spray won both the 750cc Super Cup Championship and the British F1 title while setting lap records at 5 different circuits. Trevor Nation won multiple races and finished 4th overall. 2 Norton Rotaries regularly finished 1st and 2nd against factory equipment. The competition was serious. Terry Reimer rode a factory Yamaha OW01 with complete works support. Carl Fogarty was on a Honda RC30 backed by massive factory resources. Both had huge budgets, professional teams, and major sponsors. The Norton was still being built in a shed by one man with hand tools. Attendance in British races surged. Fans came specifically to see this underdog British bike beating Japanese factory teams. JPS sold thousands of jackets and cups. The Norton Rotary became a cultural phenomenon. Steve Spray won MCN's Man of the Year award. But not everyone was happy. From the beginning, there were complaints about how the Norton was classified. The engine measured 588cc, and Norton's position was it should race in the 750cc class as a 588cc 4-stroke. Racing officials and competitors saw it differently. The Rotary produced 3 power strokes per revolution, while a traditional 4-stroke produced 1 power stroke every 2 revolutions. The Rotary was making power 3 times more frequently, which competitors argued gave an unfair advantage. Some officials wanted to classify the 588cc Norton as a 1176cc engine by doubling the displacement, which would ban it from both 750cc and 1000cc racing. The FIM originally rated the Norton at twice its displacement, then relaxed the penalty to 1.7 times. A 588cc engine multiplied by 1.7 equals 999.6cc, keeping the Norton legal for 1000cc racing by less than 1 cubic centimeter. Terry Reimer summed up the frustration, telling reporters he was tired of Nortons passing him and spitting flames in his face. But even he admitted the crowds loved it. The Norton made British racing exciting again. Success brought problems Norton wasn't prepared for. In 1989, Crichton got promoted to senior development engineer, making it impossible to keep running the race team. Norton brought in Barry Simmons as team manager. Simmons had run Honda Britain and was professional and organized. He also had completely different ideas about bike development. Crichton believed the Spondon frame and basic design were working perfectly. Why change what's winning? Simmons wanted to redesign everything, including a new chassis, different parts supplier, and switching tire sponsors. The two men clashed repeatedly. Throughout 1990, the team kept winning. Trevor Nation won the MCN TT Superbike Championship. Robert Dunlop won both the Superbike races at the Northwest 200. Results were excellent, but behind the scenes, tension was building. In September 1990, Brian Crichton quit Norton and walked away from the race team he had built from nothing. Crichton blamed the split on Simmons, saying everything he wanted to do, Simmons did the opposite. One major breaking point was Simmons switching to Michelin tires, which meant all the previous suspension development was worthless. Different tires require completely different suspension settings. Steve Spray left shortly after Crichton quit. The two people who built Norton's success, who understood the bike better than anyone, both walked away at the peak. For 1991, Simmons brought in chassis designer Ron Williams to build something new. Williams designed a different frame manufactured by Harris Performance, called the NRS 588. It looked different and handled differently, supposedly the next evolution that would be faster than Crichton's original design. Simmons signed Grand Prix legend Ron Haslam to develop the new bike. Haslam won his first race on the NRS 588, but Trevor Nation couldn't get comfortable with the new chassis and struggled. The bike was still fast enough to win occasionally, but it wasn't dominant anymore. Something fundamental had changed. In 1992, Kawasaki ZXR 750s won most British superbike races. The Norton was competitive, but not crushing the competition like before. Meanwhile, Norton was spiraling towards bankruptcy. JPS pulled sponsorship after 1992, and the official factory race team would fold. But 1992 delivered one last incredible moment. In early 1992, Steve Hislop was one of the fastest riders in British racing. He had won 3 races at the 1991 Isle of Man TT and was considered one of the best TT specialists in the world. For 1992, he signed with Yamaha to focus on short-circuit racing. Hislop gave Yamaha an ultimatum. He wanted proper factory equipment for the British Championship, or he wouldn't ride for them at the TT. Yamaha dismissed the threat because they didn't believe Hislop would walk away. After just one round where the equipment wasn't meeting standards, Hislop quit the team entirely. Carl Fogarty needed funding for his World Superbike program. Yamaha signed Fogarty to ride at the TT on the bike prepared for Hislop. Steve Hislop suddenly had no ride for the biggest races of the year and no income from the TT. Barry Simmons, still running the struggling Norton team, heard Hislop was available. Simmons immediately offered Hislop and Norton for the 2 biggest TT races. The bike would be plain white instead of JPS colors because there was no budget for proper paint, just basic white fairings. Hislop was skeptical. Nobody believed the Norton could survive 6 brutal laps of the 37.73-mile TT course in hot weather. The bike overheated on short circuits. The idea of it lasting nearly 230 miles with only 2 pit stops seemed impossible. But Hislop had no other options and needed the prize money. He accepted. With 1 month to go, Norton still needed to raise £25,000. A-Bus Security and EBC Brakes provided £10,000. The Isle of Man Tourist Board added another £10,000. Simmons declared they could go racing. Professional teams these days spend £20,000 just buying a stock road bike. Norton was funding an entire TT campaign on that budget. Steve Hislop got 1 test session at Alton Park to learn the bike. He completed 8 total laps, maybe 30 minutes of seat time. Then he went to the Isle of Man to race 230 miles on the world's most dangerous racecourse. The first race was the Formula 1 TT. Fogarty charged into a commanding lead on his factory Yamaha. Hislop struggled with overheating. Neither would win because Fogarty's pace broke the Yamaha's gearbox. Honda's Philip McCallan inherited victory. Hislop nursed his Norton home in second place. The Norton team went to Derby Airfield for emergency testing. They fitted a taller windscreen, wider handlebars, and removed the front fender to allow more air cooling. 6 days later, Senior TT race day arrived with brilliant sunshine, perfect for spectators, hell for an overheating Norton. The Senior TT sends riders off in 10-second intervals, racing against the clock. Fogarty started 4th on the road. Hislop started 19th, meaning he had to fight through slower traffic while Fogarty had clear track. Fogarty set a blazing pace, completing the first lap 1 second ahead on corrected time. By Ramsey on lap 2, Hislop had inched into the lead. He pushed harder over the mountain section, stretching his advantage to 3 seconds as they came in for the first fuel stops. In the pits, strategy became critical. Hislop's team changed his rear tire, costing time but giving fresh rubber for the final laps. Fogarty's team dashed in and out without changing tires. Fogarty stole the lead back. On lap 3, Fogarty was still ahead but his Yamaha had gone off song. By the end of lap 4, Hislop clawed back into the lead with a 7-second advantage. In the pits again for the final fuel stop, Fogarty's team was fastest. By Ballacrane on lap 5, Fogarty led by 3 seconds. Hislop rebuilt his lead through the mountain section. By the start of the final lap, he had stretched the gap to 6 seconds. Fogarty unleashed everything on that final lap. His Yamaha was falling apart with blown exhaust, rattling fixtures and fluid leaking, but none of it mattered. Fogarty wrestled the bike through every corner and pushed every straight to maximum. He smashed Hislop's lap record from the previous year, setting 123.61 mph average speed. That record would stand for 7 years. Meanwhile, Hislop stayed completely calm with typical composure, smooth, precise, never panicking. His Norton was surely taking its final gasps, but he maintained perfect lines and consistent pace. Because of starting positions, Fogarty crossed the finish line first, then came the wait. Nearly 3 minutes passed with nobody knowing who won. The crowd held its breath. Eventually, the white Norton howled into view. Norton took the checkered flag with 4.4 seconds to spare after nearly 2 hours and 228 miles of racing. Norton's first senior TT win since 1961. 31 years. The first British manufacturer to win a major TT class since 1975. The greatest TT battle in history. 2 riders separated by less than 8 seconds over 6 brutal laps. His luck declared the 1992 Senior TT probably his greatest race ever. A massive statement for a man who won over a third of the TT races he started. Britain's mainstream press flocked to the story in numbers unseen since Mike Hailwood's 1978 return. After the celebrations died down, the truth became clear. The white Norton that won the greatest TT battle in decades was fundamentally Brian Crichton's original design from the caretaker's shed. The Spondon aluminum frame, the exhaust ejector system, the basic engineering philosophy were all exactly what Crichton created. Simmons and the factory had made some changes. The NRS 588 had different bodywork and updated components, but the core of the bike that made it fast and made it work was still exactly what Crichton built in that shed with hand tools and his own money. Crichton had quit 2 years before this TT victory. He walked away when Norton changed development direction. He believed his original design was correct, and management thought they knew better. The 1992 Senior TT proved Crichton was right all along. The bike that won Norton's greatest modern victory, that beat Fogarty on a factory Yamaha, that survived 6 laps in blistering heat, was the shed-built machine that management initially thought was worthless. The design that professional executives didn't believe in. The project one persistent mechanic pushed through despite everyone telling him he was wasting his time. The Norton Rotary raced competitively for 7 years from 1988 to 1994. It won the 1989 British F1 Championship, the 1989 750 Super Cup Championship, the 1992 Senior TT, and the 1994 British Superbike Championship. The bikes won at the Northwest 200, set lap records at nearly every British circuit, and brought massive crowds back to racing. Brian Crichton built all of that starting from a crashed police bike in a borrowed shed, self-taught with no formal engineering degree, just decades of experience making things go faster. He invented the exhaust ejector system that doubled the Rotary's power. He proved the Wankel engine could win against the best bikes and riders in the world. He showed that small teams with big ideas could embarrass factory giants with unlimited resources. For 7 years, one man with hand tools beat teams with millions in funding. Then the sport changed the rules to make sure it never happened again. Brian Crichton is 77 years old now. He still believes in the Rotary engine. He still builds them by hand. The Rotary Norton years were short, but that changed British racing forever. For 7 years, a self-taught engineer working out of a caretaker's shed proved that innovation and persistence beats corporate money every time. That one person with a better idea can change an entire sport and embarrass an entire industry. Then the sport changed the rules to stop him. The shocking truth behind Brian Crichton's Norton Rotary Racer is the greatest victory came 2 years after Crichton quit the factory team. The bike that won was fundamentally his original design that management thought was worthless. One man was right, the entire establishment was wrong, and then they banned it anyway. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe because we've got more incredible banned bikes and controversial racing history coming. What other legendary machines should we cover next? Drop your suggestions in the comments, and check out our video on the Pops Yoshimura story. Thanks for watching.